Is that the enemy uses offense to stop you from being what God wants you to be. And God allows offense because he recognizes that you can't be who he wants you to be unless you get stronger. So when it comes to God being in control, it's not that God does everything the way that I want him to do it. It's not that God gets your list and sees everything that you want and you get it. It's that you trust God. I'm a very great proponent of the fact that God answers prayers and that God works miracles. I believe that God works miracles, and I've seen God work miracles, and God works miracles for me on a lot of occasions. But I also have looked around and I see that it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen all the time. Even for myself, it doesn't happen all the time. There's sometimes I pray and then I get a conviction that it's going to work and it doesn't work. But even worse, I notice other people, sometimes they pray and almost never works. And I struggle with that because I said, God, how come when certain people pray, it's like it almost always works? And then when other people pray, it doesn't seem to work. And there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of different reasons why. But I think one of the basic reasons why is that you need to have a clarity of the difference between your will and God's will. When something is my will and it doesn't happen, my response is anger. Even as a pastor, because I have this position as a leader, there are certain things that I want. So, for example, if I don't I would like for us to go back to church and to see each other face to face, right? I would like for that to happen. And for me, when it doesn't happen, there's a little part of me that's a little upset about it. Like I'm a little bothered by that. But the reason why I'm bothered by it is because that's my will. But now, someone else is talking to me about how they're working from home, and they want to go back to the office to start working back in the office because they can't take being at home alone. For me, I don't mind my work life, me being at home alone, because I actually prefer that. So when you're complaining to me about how you want to go back to the office, I don't really care. And not that I'm heartless, I just don't care because that's your will. When somebody else has a will and it's not accomplished, you're not as bothered by when you have a will and it's not accomplished. As a matter of fact, you can actually support them and help them and not feel bad when they feel bad because you haven't personally taken on that will to be your own will, if you understand what I'm saying. So on the other hand, when it comes to God, when a person really understands that God's in control of things, they recognize that God's will, on one hand, God's will is my will because I want to support God in whatever he decides. But on the other hand, God's will is not my will because this is what he decides that he wants to have happen. So now, if I'm praying to God to do something in my life and I have a full conviction that it's God's will and not my will, on one hand, I'm going to believe it's going to happen. But on the other hand, if it doesn't happen, it's God's will. It's not my will. So if I'm praying for something and it doesn't happen, then either God didn't have it set to happen yet, or perhaps I was incorrect. But at the end of the day, if it's God's will, it's God's responsibility. I'll still pray. I'll still do whatever I need to do. But when I'm doing things for God's will, I have less of a feeling of anger because I recognize that this is God's will. So if God doesn't want it to happen, and I'm praying for it and God doesn't want it to happen, or God doesn't feel it has to happen right now, I will continue to pray. I will continue to seek direction from God. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be frustrated because it's God's will.